Bad week to be Rudy Giuliani. Just this afternoon, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in federal court in New York, estimating debts between 100 and 500 million and assets of less than $10 million. This comes just a day after a ruling by federal judge Beryl Howell that Georgia poll workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss can immediately seek the $148 million defamation award he owes them. In her ruling, Judge Howell cited concerns that Giuliani might, quote, conceal and dissipate his assets if he were allowed to wait. Howell also claimed that Mr. Giuliani has, quote, proven himself to be an unwilling and uncooperative litigant after previously ignoring requests for payment. Giuliani still could appeal the millions in damages awarded by the jury last week, but Judge Howell notes that the amount the jurors decided was actually conservative, given the damage he caused the lives of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. Joining us at the table, MSNBC legal analysts Lisa Rubin, Andrew, and Basil. They are both back with us as well. Okay, this doesn't get Rudy Giuliani off the hook, right?
It doesn't get Rudy Giuliani off the hook, but it does press pause. So, Lisa, you were saying that yesterday, Judge Howell allowed Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss to immediately enforce the judgment. The impact of this bankruptcy filing is to repause enforcement efforts. Right now, Rudy Giuliani doesn't have to continue litigating those cases against him. There are a series of other defamation cases by Dominion, by Smartmatic, both makers of voting machines, by Hunter Biden. There's a sexual assault and harassment case brought by his former employee, Noelle Dunphy. All of those are on hold. And as well, any efforts to enforce pre-filing judgments against him, that means that $148 million verdict by Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, right now that's on hold. But when you commit an intentional tort like defamation or intentional infliction of emotional distress, you don't get to discharge that in bankruptcy, meaning a bankruptcy judge can't wipe that slate clean for you. At some point, Rudy Giuliani is going to face the music with respect to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss.
So Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, how soon then could they see something?
It's going to be a while. Rudy is going to get the benefit of getting to reorganize his estate, essentially, and they will take their place in line along with other creditors. Those creditors not only include other litigants, but people that he owes money to independent of litigation, such as his former lawyers or accountants. The beauty of the bankruptcy filing, as humiliating as it is for Giuliani, and as much as it forestalls that recovery, is that he has to be transparent with the bankruptcy court. He can't play the same shell game that he has been playing with Judge Howell that resulted in the default judgment against him. He has to essentially open his kimono and say, these are my assets, these are my liabilities. With Rudy, maybe that's not the right analogy.
I was about to say, thanks for that, Lisa.
Yeah, can't get that out of my head.
I'm sorry.
You were going to jump in.
So there's some pluses to the bankruptcy if you are a creditor like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. The assets are frozen. He cannot, if he tries to move them around, if he tries to pull them out of his estate, if he tries to hide them, that is a crime. And there will be a court that is overseeing all of this. If he does what he did in the civil litigation with Beryl Howell, to Lisa's point, and says, I'm not telling you where stuff is, that is contempt. He can go to jail for that. And the one thing that does not get stayed, he is facing a criminal case in Georgia. That case is going forward regardless of whether he is in sort of civil bankruptcy. So he still has an enormous amount of liability ahead for him.
I think, though, about that long list of other cases that you just laid out and the fact that when they presented this number in this specific defamation suit, they said the idea here is to deter future behavior, right? And we saw 5 minutes after that was delivered, he walked outside, made it very clear that he was not, in fact, deterred from doing that in the future. And that would seem relevant not just to this case, but the many cases that he is facing.
Yes, to the many cases he's facing. And remember also that the folks who represent Ruby and Shay have now filed a second lawsuit to try to enjoin Rudy from continuing to put their names in his mouth, as their lawyer has said. That theoretically is now on pause, too. So the deterrence effect not only of the award, but of future litigation to try and get an injunction against him, at least for the moment, that stayed. But to Andrew's point, the criminal law enforcement is not. And at the end of the day, no judge is going to let him wipe an award for defamation damages clean from his bankrupt estate.
I also think with respect to the injunctive, the second lawsuit, the new one, which is seeking just injunctive relief, not money, it's to say, stop defaming my clients. To me, it's hard to see that Beryl Howell will not figure out how to have that case go forward, because it's not pulling money out of the estate. It's not dealing with sort of the main focus of bankruptcy, which is to deal with sort of how do you allocate money amongst creditors. That's what bankruptcy is for. This is an ongoing harm. And so a bankruptcy judge is going to have the bankruptcy matter. The former chief judge of the D.C. District Court, Beryl Howell, clearly is going to have an interest in making sure that she is ruling on that continuing harm.
And his appeal, where does that factor in?
Well, he doesn't have an appeal right now. And one of the other things about Judge Howell's ruling yesterday was when she said that she would lift the stay of the judgment and allow them to immediately register their judgments in the two places that he owns property. She also said, make no mistake, to the extent that he's going to appeal, A, I don't think that's likely to be successful, but B, like anybody else, he's going to have to post a full bond. Normally, as Andrew and I both know from civil litigation, that kind of bond is in the full amount of the award. And as the appeal continues, you collect interest. So query whether a Rudy Giuliani who files a Chapter 11 petition for bankruptcy is ever going to have access to $148 million to satisfy the bond requirement. It's not clear to me that he can both file for bankruptcy and try to appeal this judgment.